I think the biggest fear of the power structure at the top levels, that lower ones might not understand, but at the top levels, clearly their fear is that we become aware of who we are. Anything that would lead to that, they don't like, because, see, we have a lot more potential to do things than they do.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got another great first-time guest. So many great guests lately. It's Richard Sachs of the Lost Arts radio show, and I've actually been on his show, and we've actually been talking offline quite a bit because I get the sense he's really on to a lot of things that I've been starting to realize myself. And as you know, here on Anarchast, or even on my personal YouTube channel, I've done a lot of work on myself in various forms, a lot of consciousness sort of stuff, a lot of health stuff, including fasting. And the fasting thing to me has really stuck with me as being shockingly good. I was not expecting when I first wrote, it was about 2 years ago, I wrote on Facebook, FBI book, I wrote that hey, I'm going to try a fast for a couple of days. And all the comments were like, you're crazy, you're going to die, you have to eat, and all this sort of stuff. And on day 2 of fasting, I had never felt better in my life. I had so much energy, and I was like, there's something to this. And I went on, I've done numerous fasts since then. I think during one fast, I just quit smoking, like on day 2 of the fast. I've, just so you know, I've started re-smoking in the last few months. Been going through a lot of stressful stuff. It's sort of been a little bit of a crutch, but I'm planning on probably getting off of it again at some point here fairly soon. But on one fast, I just had no desire to smoke anymore. And so I was like, there's something to this fasting stuff. And I got talking to Richard, and actually I was on his show, and he told me, you should check out these Essene Gospels. I don't know exactly what it is. Richard can explain about it a bit. Apparently, it's something that could have been in the Bible, but isn't. And this whole Bible thing, I'm still like, who put in what parts? I'm trying to figure out like what's going on. I know there's some good stuff in there, but I know there's some lies. And then when Richard actually said, just read these Essene Gospels, and I don't know much about them. We'll let Richard explain that a bit later about what that actually is. It made perfect sense what was in those books. It was about fasting. It was about that's how you connect with God, is by cleaning your body as your temple, and all these sort of things. And it just rang so true to me. And I just got talking more and more with Richard. We actually he does like sort of consultations with people about, sort of about how to live these sort of ways. And he has a really interesting diet. I don't want to make this intro too long here, Richard, but a really interesting diet. I think you just eat nuts, fruits, and raw milk, I believe. We'll talk about that. And he talks about longevity and all this kind of stuff, and it all makes a lot of sense to me. So I was like, Richard, let's get you on Anarchast. I know you're an anarchist, so let's get you on here. You're also thinking very seriously about coming down to Acapulco, and just for people who don't know, the entire health and wellness portion of the event will run the entire event this year. All 4 days of Acapulco, there's going to be a health and wellness stage, and if Richard comes down, we'd be very happy if he spoke on one of those stages and did some of the things that he does. So that's a long introduction, Richard, but it's quite a bit to talk about, and we're going to get into a lot of this stuff. So if you're out there looking for even just health things, pay attention to this. I think there's something really to what Richard's talking about here. I've done it personally, and I've felt it. And then if you're into, being happier or being more conscious or connecting more with whatever you want to call it, God, universe, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care about the names. But having that connection, that feeling, I think it comes through really cleaning out your body and then cleaning out your mind, which I've talked about with the therapy work I've done and the hypnotherapy and all these sort of stuff. Richard's really quite an expert on a lot of this stuff, so I just want to throw it out there that I've tried all these things, and all of them have been working very well for me. I've been doing incredibly well personally. So Richard, true pleasure to have you on. You know the first question. How did you become an anarchist?
Well, actually, I guess I was born with the problem of needing to question everything and say, why? Well, I had to be able to talk first, but as soon as that happened, I started asking, why do you have to do this? And I really gave probably an unintended hard time to my elementary school teachers, because like I remember when they said to memorize the multiplication tables, I wanted to know why. Why do you have to do that? It's right there, you could look at it. And once they explained, to my satisfaction as a, I don't know, 8-year-old or something, then I said, fine, I'll do that. And I just wanted to know, why does everybody know that something is true or that it's necessary? And also to a large extent, what's possible. And I never got over it, so I'm still coming from that point of view, and it's led to some really unusual places.
And I presume part of those places has been to realize that being owned by government and how government works and being actually a slave and having rulers is probably not a great thing. Is that part of the realizations that you had over time?
Yeah, I wondered why that is, because, you know, it was a really long process for me to finally realize the nature of the entire power structure that is behind governments and global corporations now, because they're almost indistinguishable at this point. And governments are legally corporations for the most part, or webs of corporations. And I wanted to totally understand where that came from, what's behind it, and I saw it creating incredible suffering in the world. And I just had a preference to not see people being, you know, torn to pieces that way. And I started serious health research about 1965, and then about in the last 20 years of that, at the same time, I did a really in-depth investigation of the global power structure and how that's been in control of most of the world for a long time. Took that back several thousand years and at least that far. And I found out that at the top, it's actually controlled by very brilliant, very malicious beings, not very many of them, that normal people would never think anybody could come from that place. And I think that's their main camouflage, is that people think other people are kind of normal. And on those levels, it's not really the case.
Yeah, that happens a lot with a lot of people when I'm trying to explain to them. Now, these people are, as you pointed out, incredibly smart. I don't know how they have these levels of knowledge, and that's something too that we can talk about how you can possibly attain these levels of knowledge. And I think, you know, for whatever reason, incredibly smart, but also incredibly nefarious, and they have no problem killing tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people just to get their way. And I think we talked about this before in another conversation about it's not really about money, it's about power and control and subjugation of pretty much the entire human race, which they've done to an extent now, as we know. And you're talking about your experience in the government indoctrination camps and schools. I remember too when they're like, you have to memorize all these mathematical tables, and I was like you, I was like, why? And they're like, well, it's not like you're going to have a calculator with you all the time. And it's like, oh really? Like I've got more than a calculator with me all the time. It's fine. I don't need to, you know, it's great if that's what you want to do, right? If you're really into math, I'm just not that into it. It's like, it's useful, obviously, and it's good, and I need to know numbers at certain times, but I don't need to be memorizing all this stuff. So I was very much the same way as you, just questioning everything, and I think I've gone on just to continue doing that my whole life as you. So, you know, where do you start with what you've learned by questioning everything? What would you like to say to people about what's really going on, or what it is that you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, considering the depth of this subject, I'm so grateful that you've scheduled 12 hours for this interview. I don't think we'll finish in that time. But
I can't do 12. It's too much. But we could talk about it easily for 12. We could talk about it for 12 days or 12 months. Almost endless amount of things to talk about.
When you really understand what the subject means, it's who you are. And out of that comes what you can do. And what's the point of being here right now? What's your purpose? Because, as you know, any activity that starts without a clear sense of purpose is probably going to go off track without even knowing it. Several things I wanted to say at once. One was that you were describing the motivation of the people at the top. They have no problem in doing some unpleasant things to people to get their way, and it's even beyond that. Some of these people at the really top levels, what they want is to cause massive suffering as much as possible. And that's the ceremonies that they're into, of doing things to children and stuff. It really is going on. It's beyond a horror movie, and it's not the point to get into that and feel really upset. It's just to be strategically aware that that's where all these different agendas that we're dealing with come from, that seem like separate things. You know, the toxic medicine and the poison food and water and air and the chemtrail activity that's going on now all over the world and has not just toxic metals, but dried blood cells and biological weapons and stuff in it, and the frequencies they're choosing for the Wi-Fi and the wireless devices and the smart meters and 5G, and this is all unified. It's these guys, in addition to being incredibly smart, are geniuses at organization, and not just in telling people what to do, but providing different levels of motivation to the different levels of servants they have. You know, some think that it's going to be fantastic money and power and prestige and perks, and they're into it for that. They don't know who they work for, really, and then at higher levels, they tell them, we're going to reduce population, and at the top levels above that, they let a few people know that, yeah, that we're doing a ceremonial sacrifice of the entire biosphere, because they believe in the doctrine of sacrifice, which is that if you kill something innocent, I know this sounds bizarre, I'm sorry, but it's in the Bible and all kinds of scriptures. If you kill an innocent being and you do it just right, God's going to be really happy with you. It's going to be great. You're going to get all this spiritual benefit, and then you're going to eventually merge with the being that you're worshiping, which in their case is a not very nice being. And at levels way below that, it's about money, but not at the top. So my interest in that was not to get lost in it emotionally, but to be aware of it. And then my question was, since I like solutions, and it looked like you couldn't really overcome what they were doing with that much momentum by fighting individual issues head on, what can we do to take out the cost of the whole thing? And I still feel like that's a primary interest, probably the primary interest. And then on the way to that, I found a place where health fits into it, because what we're told about health is not the real story. And doctors in the U.S. and other parts of the world get murdered for exposing even a little bit of it. And I thought, well, we need to expose all of it, because if we have a total picture of it, we could use it. And then from that, once you're done with your health problems and that doesn't bother you anymore, and you're not worried about aging or infectious disease or degenerative diseases or cancer, all these things, once that's gone, which it easily can be, because that's our normal state, then you can start your real work, which is internal and not physical, but it affects the physical dramatically. And that gets to where you can actually affect the root of this thing that they intend to do to the world and reverse it. That interests me a lot.
Yeah, for people out there who, I've met some people, for example, we have at Anarchapulco speaking people like Mark Passio and David Icke. And the reasons I want people like that there is because they have done a lot of work to try to figure out how this whole system works, and they've got a lot of evidence of it all, and some just amazing work and how it all works and why and all these sort of things. But there's some people who I meet every now and then, they're like, why do you have all these crazy conspiracy theorists at your conference? And I'd like to explain to them somehow that what you see isn't necessarily what's really going on. And for whatever reason, some people just refuse to even to think about that there might be other possibilities. And really, that's really what it comes down to for me, is at least giving people, or at least allowing people the ability or the opportunity to have access to this information, and if they so choose, to look into it a little bit. But as you know, Richard, and as I know, and I've looked into this stuff for probably about 20 years straight now, every rabbit hole you go down, there's the same people at the end, and you see how they're doing it, and it's amazing. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see with my own eyes how they do it. And you pointed out how they're incredibly smart. I just, and they're like, I don't know how they know all these things that they do and how they're able to do a lot of the stuff they do. At some level, and we can even talk about this a little bit, there's some sort of spiritual level to it. They're getting some sort of access to something to be able to pull the blindfold over people so easily, and you know, look back at all the movies, The Wizard of Oz, there's the man behind the curtain. They put a lot of this stuff out there in various forms. I'm not saying whoever wrote The Wizard of Oz is necessarily with those guys or anything. I don't know, but a lot of this stuff is out there. They have a bit of a thing where they, and this might be part of their beliefs, and maybe you understand their beliefs better than I, but they appear to have a need to tell people what they're going to do to them before they do it. There seems to be some sort of natural law that they're aware of that they have to do that. And another thing, and this is a big thing, a lot of people will say, well, you know, Barack Obama and Donald Trump and all these people, the central bank people, Ben Bernanke, like, these people aren't that smart. And it's like, no, they're not that smart. They're just basically puppets doing these sort of a thing. But they don't even know necessarily what they're actually doing, as you pointed out. But they've set up the systems in place where they've incentivized everyone to be doing their work without even knowing they're doing their work for them. And on top of that, just my final comment here is that it's really ingenious how they've done it, because they seem to understand that if you kill a lot of innocent people necessarily, and you don't tell them you're going to do it, and if you actually do it with your own hands, you will have repercussions, whether you want to call it karma, going to hell, whatever there's all sorts of different words for these sort of things. They seem to understand that, so they've set up a system where they don't actually have to do anything themselves. They get other people to do it for them. And those are people like order followers, people in the police or in the military who go and kill innocent people, and they have no repercussions karmically, or however you want it, whatever you think's actually going on. They don't seem to have the repercussions because they didn't actually do it. They just convinced those people to go do it for them. So, you know, I just said a lot of things there. I'm sure you have a lot of comments, so you can just take it from there.
Yeah. Every one of those is such a deep subject. You know, we could really spend some time on it, and we should at some point. But basically, yeah, they're aware they have to follow their rules. So these guys didn't make up those rules. They exist in trying to get the benefit that they want from the bad things that they're doing. Two of them are they have to have certain milestones they reach and recognize, and others are they have to give certain notices to the people that are their victims. That's us and the whole biosphere, actually, not just humans. So they realize they have to do that, and the power that you mentioned that helps them with this level of intelligence that they have and what they need to accomplish, that there's a negative polarity in this dimension of existence that is real, conscious, and intelligent, and they worship that. It's what loves everything connected with suffering and destruction and all that. It's real, not something that normal people would relate to at all. And it does give them the ability to achieve more. It's used a lot in Hollywood and other kinds of business areas and things like that. And in fact, some of the performers in Hollywood have been surprised by it and said, wow, they wanted me to actually worship Satan to get this position, and they weren't kidding. And the word, whether you call it Satan or not, makes no difference at all. It's that there's a frequency that goes with that dark energy, and it does give people a certain kind of power that's like a drug, and then they get all excited about that and want more, and then in the end they'll do whatever it takes to get more of that. The problem with that, and I have several things I want to say at once in response to all the issues you brought up. The people that are, well, two main things. The people that are thinking that they're going to avoid the karma for what they're doing by following the rules, getting people to do it for them, and thinking that we're so stupid that we'd go be their servants, which most of us do in certain ways. They're mistaken in that they will not be immune from karma for doing that. From what I've found out about where karma comes from, it's in deep programming in the consciousness and the mind of the person that is doing the actions. You don't need some nasty God to enforce penalties for things, because your own consciousness will do it automatically. No separate God has to watch you carefully, and if he doesn't see what you're doing, you know you're going to get away with something. You don't get away with anything ever, because your own consciousness is right there, and because it comes from the same source. Even if you're playing the part of a really bad person right now, you came from the same sources everything came from, and that consciousness is part of that, and it wants you back. So that's the reason that it enforces karma. It's actually for your learning experience and benefit. And that's a huge subject in itself. And it's not evil at the deepest levels, and neither are the people who are playing those parts. But for us, even knowing about the extent of the negative forces, the nice thing about that is that the positive ones are so far beyond that the solution is being carried inside everybody. And just knowing about how bad things are doesn't mean that the end result is going to be bad. In the long run, we're guaranteed to be okay to such a degree we can't imagine. But what my interest is in the present lifetime and moment for right now is I personally prefer for people and other beings not to have to go through all this torture. And so I wanted to know, yeah, we'll be okay in the long run, which I really feel clear about. But how about being okay sooner than that and turning things around on this planet so it doesn't become hell on earth, which is part of the plan before extinction? Why don't we do the opposite? And I found out we have the ability to make that happen.
Yeah, one of the things I've said in various ways, and I really do believe, is that we all have the ability to change the world. And the thing that I think we've been mostly sort of robbed of is not knowing that, having that knowledge taken away from us, that every single person can actually change the world in a good way if you want to, and it's actually not even that hard. But they put all these systems in place. You're born, they're cutting off half your skin off your penis, circumcising, they're injecting you with vaccines, they're rubbing stuff in your eyes so you can't see your mom, so you don't have a love connection with your mom. As soon as you get through all that, they got you, don't breastfeed because that's not very healthy. Here, take some chemical milk, and then throw you into the government indoctrination camps. You're getting beat up, and you're being told that you better get an A or you're never going to have a good job, and all this stuff. And I could go on and on and on. At the end of the day, it leaves people going, oh, this life sucks. I'm no one, and I have no ability, and I just have to go along and get a job and do what I'm told, and all these sort of things. But the actual truth of the matter is every single person has the ability to dramatically change the world, in my opinion, and I know you believe that as well. I guess, maybe you want to talk about that, or maybe we should talk about how you can get to that stage. And I know you believe that health is a big part of that, to sort of be able to vibrate on different levels, to sort of raise your consciousness, to be able to affect the world in ways that we're capable of doing.
Yeah, another 10-hour question is really great. And I do totally believe every single person has virtually unlimited power. And it's not primarily by what we do physically, although that comes as a natural outgrowth of what happens internally. But my understanding now, and I'm just totally aware that I'm a beginner in all this, and I have enough that I have to share it now. I've spent more than half a century on it, but compared to what there is to know, I mean, I'm below preschool level, and I really mean that. But still, what I've seen at this level so far is that we're totally not physical beings. We have these amazing costumes, physical bodies, and we have minds, which are different than brains. Brains is part of the body. Mind is above the physical level and survives physical death. But who we are is not mind. It's not energy. It's not light. It's not frequency. It's what all those things come from. It's really quite, totally mind-boggling, and reconnecting to that, to one step after another, closer and closer, makes everything else possible. And whatever you do on the physical level starts to have immense amounts of power and potential based on the consciousness. And the reason that physical health matters for any of that, you can do a lot of it without, even if you're really sick and everything, but it just makes it so much easier to get the internal connection back once you get rid of the health issues. And so when I ran into the book that you mentioned, the Essene Gospel, I was about 10 years into the health experimental research that I was doing at that time. That was 75. And I really resonated with what was in that book, not just the words, but the feeling and the energy that I picked up for it. You might have had some similar feeling. And for me, I remembered actually being there, and I have some partial memory of old times like that. I'd like to have a lot more, but I had enough, so I recognized it, and I started working on how do you adapt what Jesus was actually teaching in terms of physical health that, like you said, never made it into the Bible. That went through a lot of hands of human censors for their own reasons, and they were setting up a power structure as well. It was called religion, but it was like a government in a way. And Jesus was never teaching religion in my experience, but he was teaching incredible stuff, not just how to reconnect to your source and how to live to do that and then what that would allow you to do, but how to take care of your physical body. And it was incredible. So I took that, and it was all set in an environment of about 2,000 years ago. And I said, well, we really need to know how to do that, how to adapt it to use now. And so I spent a lot of time over the next 40-some years experimentally trying it, and like you're doing with the fasting, and I wanted to know all about how will it fit in the current environment so that we can then use it to get to the next level and start reversing the trend that's negative in the world right now, so people have I just want everybody to be okay. I mean, that's my whole motive. So, but what I did find that was really interesting is to really do the physical things that Jesus is referring to, and a lot of other great health teachers have referred to parts of it as well in more recent times and older times too. In order to really put it to use requires starting to work on consciousness at the same time, because if you don't do that, then you run into emotional barriers that come up when you try to change habits that you're really attached to. And the obvious addictions are not the only ones. I mean, just because you're not a heroin addict doesn't mean you're not an addict in 100 different ways. And when you start to have to physically look at those and even consider changing them, it feels scary and difficult, and your mind will come up with a million ways why it may be illogical, but you'd rather be sick and have a harder and harder time than have to actually face your own daily habits. And so to not have that barrier, that really interested me, and I had to find consciousness tools that take away the need for willpower so that you can do this easily. And I found that to be very valuable.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you want to get into some of those tools, but very interesting. I know you also have a sort of a private radio show thing that, as you told me earlier, like if you talked about a lot of stuff, you might get banned or killed off the internet.
One or the other, whatever comes first, you know. Yeah,
one or the other. And so you're a little bit careful about how you spread that information. And we've seen it with, natural doctors coming out with stuff, and they have major problems. And I've seen it with everything I ever do. Trying to attack the system, or not even attack the system, but trying to get away from the system and live a better life. You will, they will do some things, and they'll try to stop you in various ways and things like that.
So, I was actually trying to be pretty invisible for most of the time I was doing this work. And then about 5 years ago, I got asked to do the radio show that you were on. And so I figured, all right, this is obviously what I need to do, and I'm just not going to worry about it, but I'll try to be as smart as possible about the words I use and what to do. So I think the biggest fear of the power structure at the top levels, lower ones might not understand, but at the top levels, clearly their fear is that we become aware of who we are. Anything that would lead to that, they don't like, because, see, we have a lot more potential to do things than they do. Because one of the many laws of nature that we haven't been told is that if we have malice for anybody, bad intent for anybody, whether it's justified or not, because it's always justified when people have wars and stuff, both sides are justifying to themselves. And if you have any malintent toward anybody at all, even if they're really being bad, that restricts you to the lowest levels of access to your power. And that's restricting the whole negative hierarchy right now. And they know it at the top. And they know we don't have that restriction. So what they want to do is two things. One is give us that restriction by making us hate each other, at which point, forget accessing your own real power, you won't do it. And the other is to keep you away from any reality of understanding who you are and what you can really do. So that's good guidance for us. Government guidance in general is wonderful. I trust government completely because whatever they say is great, with rare exceptions, is probably going to really hurt or kill you. And what they say is dangerous is probably essential for life. So it's a wonderful guidance source. And if you take it to the top levels, their main thing being that we should never find out what we can really do. Great, that means that's the main thing we should focus on. And we can talk about tools for that. I mean, there are these two things happening in parallel when you try to make some progress in this direction. One is that we're physically doing things, most of us, because we don't know, that are really hurting our bodies. And the other thing is, in parallel to that, mind. I'm sorry if this is going to sound really weird, but, we're on your show, so you're used to it.
None of this sounds weird at all to me.
Mind is a really important thing to understand, and so is body. We think we understand our physical body. I'm this old, I look like this, I'm this race, or this tall, or this much weight, or whatever, but some of this is hard to put in words. But because the origin was formless consciousness, what people call God or spirit or source, or the name is completely irrelevant. I don't use the word God too much because it's become stereotyped into this really nasty male figure that wants to throw you into permanent torture if you don't obey. But it's because he loves you so much. And I'm not trying to do that image at all. I'm talking about something way beyond that human concept that people will kill for, at a level that we don't really have access to yet, but we can, because it's where we came from and it's who we are. So when we came down to the physical level, we needed a couple things in order to have the experience that we needed here for the lessons that are available on this dimension. One of them was we needed an interface between spirit, which is what we are, no matter what we believe. That's a whole other issue. We needed something called mind as an interface between that and the almost infinite information that defines the physical world. And that's mind. And mind is amazing, and it has access to all information relating to this level. It doesn't have a subconscious or an unconscious. That's from our point of view, because we're not in touch with it. To mind, it's all conscious. And mind is self-aware. It's not a thing. It's not like just some kind of energetic entity or something. It's aware, like a person is, even though it's our projection. So that opens up possibilities. It means that we can have two-way communication with mind. And if we make it into an ally, all kinds of things like the basis of karma completely change. And the old yogis in the Himalayas were really smart guys meditating in caves and trying to get through the facade of the physical appearance of everything. And they saw that mind was generating these thoughts and emotions that were really messing up their life and clouding their perception and making them identify with things that they weren't. So they tried to fight with mind. That's a really bad approach, and it doesn't work, because you end up having mind fight itself, and it can have some very unusual results, and apparently miraculous things happening, from some of the discipline that they were doing, the ascetics, but it doesn't end the problem, and it keeps karma going. But if you make mind an ally, which you can start to do by just becoming aware, like the first tool that I would mention is becoming aware of the constant flow of thoughts and emotions going in the back of your mind all the time, that we're so used to, we just assume it's us and we don't pay any attention. As soon as you step back and watch that, instead of watching to criticize everybody around you and situations and who to blame and what to feel bad about or all this stuff that we do, instead of that, it's a new habit that you can form to start watching the programming that's taking place in your own mind, and just becoming aware of that starts to separate you from it, which is a step toward experiencing who you are. The other is that body is self-aware also, and in fact it's this complex network of different awarenesses. The body as a whole has its own consciousness. It's aware of itself that way. Every part of the body, like your arm, has a separate consciousness capable of communication. And you take it down to cells and atoms. Every one of them is a self-aware being. This is all interwoven. And we're the resident. And they're all keeping their focus on us all the time. Which is why, like looking up to God or something, they look at us with that degree of constant focus. And that's why your thoughts and emotions affect your physical body. Because the body and the cells and the parts of the body and the organs, they take your thoughts and your emotions as orders, like definitions of reality. And that's what they make happen. So if you feel hopeless and depressed or really angry or upset about anything or in some kind of a negative frequency, you would say, your cells believe that's the reality, and they start to make it come true. And that's where the power of the placebo comes in, because something that you believe, not on the memory level where you just memorize what your group is supposed to believe, but the gut level belief that controls your feeling. On that level, if you have a feeling that things are really great, or you believe something's going to heal you, it tends to do that, even if it's just, water or something, because it's all programmed. So that's one of the first tools, and generally in parallel, to get the best results, you need to start learning the physical, mundane details that are talked about in the Essene Gospel of stuff that affects your body, like every single thing that you eat here, because everything you do has an effect. Everything you eat does something to your body, positive or negative. What you drink, what you breathe, in the air, or smoking cigarettes and marijuana and different things, drugs you take, exercise that you do or don't do. Everybody, their body needs 3 different kinds of exercise, and if you miss those, then the degeneration that they call normal aging starts taking over. Sunlight exposure is critical. We're told that it's bad for you and it will kill you, so it's right.
Yep.
And grounding to the earth, where the 7.83 normal Schumann frequency is supposed to, harmonize with the body and bring you back to normal, and instead of being surrounded by Wi-Fi and all these intentionally disruptive energies. So you learn the physical protocols, and it's a progression. It's not like on the first day you're making the mistakes, and the second day it's all great. If you change it too fast, it's going to be harder. And so you start by getting rid of the stuff that's the most damaging, and keep moving that way. And fasting fits in as a detox protocol that is built into the body so that it can keep renewing itself. And it's not like fasting cures anything. It's just that the life current that is enlivening your body right now, all the time, is very aware and knows exactly what you personally need for healing. And the only thing is it physically it can't attend to that as long as you're keeping it busy with too much food and kinds of food that are actually damaging you, because that's what they're designed to do. And once you take those out of the way, and the body says, wow, I don't have to put all this work into digestion and assimilation and elimination of food. I know the next thing to do is these toxins that I couldn't get rid of before, that I stored in the cells, trillions of cells all over the body. It knows where every single deposit is, how to remove it, and it does it in waves so that it doesn't take it all out at once and it poisons you too much. So if you learn how to use fasting and cleaning the gut at the same time with water, it's called enemas, which they used back since the beginning in other forms. Then the physical level and the consciousness tools work together, and you can tell if you're getting closer, because as you do, this feeling of I can't even describe it. It's like really happy starts coming up from nowhere, and because it's part of who you are. We're trained that we need everything outside to happen a certain way to be happy, or it comes from a different person that you're with, or it comes from some great event that happens. That was never true. The real happiness is in the other direction. It comes from inside you. And as you do these things, what you're approaching is just feeling really good all the time. And as you want more, that drags you in the right direction. And the radiation that's coming out of you like a frequency, which is happening now, but it's scattered in most people and chaotic and negative. When that gets coherent, that's the most powerful way that you affect the whole world, because everybody else is running on a frequency too, even the so-called bad guys, except that where you can get to is much more powerful than them. So you get farther in that direction and you say something innocuous like hello, and it carries your frequency, and it will change people down to their core. But the way to do it is forget about changing the outside so much. Change the inside, and then these ways to change the outside are just going to come up, and you won't be able to avoid them. They're just going to happen as part of your inner process.
Yeah, that's something that I've been talking about for a couple of years now, that I realized that I didn't realize that I didn't realize before. And, you know, as a male and growing up in an environment of basically very violent environment, you know, basically grow up, get beat up every day, have to beat up other people. The game we played was hockey, where it's just all fighting. I thought, you know, the way to be, you know, a strong man in this world is to be that way. And in order to change the world, I have to go out there and kill some people or force them to do things and all this sort of stuff. Right. And it led me down a path where I ended up incredibly depressed, and through a number of things, and psychedelics helped me at the very beginning just get to change my vibe a little bit. And then once I started with a bit of fasting, and you mentioned the enemas, all of a sudden I was like, I haven't felt this good in a long time. And all of a sudden, everything just started to change around me. And I could see, like, as you said, as your frequency changes, or whatever you want to say, it actually affects the people around you. And this is where I come back to what we were saying, that we can change the world dramatically. But it's not about going out there and holding up a sign or yelling at people. It's actually going in and changing yourself, and then everything changes outside of you. That's the real key. And you brought up earlier about, well, first of all, how everything we're told is, if by the government or the mainstream media or anything, do the exact opposite, because that's what they want. Yeah, it's a pretty good rule of thumb. And you know, like, who are you sort of a thing. You know, if you ask your average person, you just go up to them and go, hey, like, who are you really? And they'll go, I'm an accountant. And it's like, no, but that's what you do. But like, who are you? And they'll be like, well, I'm 35 years old. It's like, that's the age of your body. Who are you? You know, they just have no concept of what we've just been talking about. And that's on purpose. And then they built up this whole thing of scientism. And they're like, oh, you know, this was just like there was an explosion 6 billion years ago. 6 billion. They always put in the 666 somewhere. And they're actually hilarious. I actually think the more I learn about these guys, they're pretty funny. The way they do things, they've got everyone believing the wrong thing, and they throw in all these like little clues all the time, and like they must just think it's hilarious to destroy so many people for whatever reason. But yeah, so their whole thing is, yeah, so 6 billion years ago there was nothing. Okay, then what happened? An explosion. Oh, and that's science. Okay, and then it's just, you know, now there's everything, and that's not a religion or anything. That's science, and there was nothing here, and you know, then some water came to the planet from meteorites. Really? How did the meteorites have water? Oh, don't worry about that. It's all science. And then there was nothing, and then there was some amoebas, and then there was rats, and that turned into you. So you're basically a rat living in the middle of nowhere in an infinite universe, and you're not important whatsoever. And so just eat your pizza that we're going to drive down your throats when advertising and all this sort of stuff. Take your vaccines. Go to your schools so you get educated, so you never learn anything. And that's basically what they've done to people and you can just see it, and that's what's actually the problem in most societies today, is that people are just absolutely destroyed, and they don't even know they're destroyed, and they don't know that there's actually a way to fix it all, and it's actually quite simple. Little things like don't eat for a couple of days, or you know, you can go on about some other sort of things, but like just, you know, stop doing all those things, and you can get back to being very good, and once you do that, all of a sudden the world changes. So yeah, this has all been hidden from us, and it's actually quite simple, isn't it? Like, really what you're talking about is not very complicated, is it?
Right. No, you don't have to be a really advanced physicist or anything to understand it. In fact, it's beyond mind. The reality is completely beyond mind. Mind is just an interface to deal with all the complexities of the world, but who we are is not even part of that, the original part. And so, yeah, I completely agree. It's quite simple. And the reason it's hard to change is basically everybody just wants to feel good. Even the bad guys who are torturing people and everything, they think that causing pain is going to make them feel really good. That's why they do it. And they're on a drug. You know, that's their drug. So we have it on a milder scale, that we think eating something that we know maybe isn't good for us makes us feel good. It's closer to being happy, and that's the point of the whole thing. And it takes a certain amount of, I guess, maybe disappointment and realization that that's not really making you very happy, and all of these temporary things wear off, and you don't want to have it wear off anymore. You want to feel good all the time, and you eventually get to a point where you really want that, and you're willing to do some things to change it. And you also have a motivation to maybe really want to do something good in the outside world or for other people so that they could feel good too. And it's not like giving them an unlimited supply of some special food. It would be affecting them by resonance, by what you become. So that eventually, you see, there's no way around having to deal with what is inside of you, and you don't need to do decades of psychoanalysis or anything, because that's all on a lower level contained within the mind programs. And what you're going to be doing is completely separating from those programs 100%, and then opening up a new communication with mind and body, which are like your abandoned children that you've just been letting them run around not cared for since before you were born. And they're not very happy about that.
Yeah, this is something that I didn't realize whatsoever, and it was actually my therapist who said it to me for the first time, and I was quite surprised when he said it. We were just talking, and he said, "Have you ever thought to thank your body?" And I was like, "No, why? Why would I thank my body?" He's like, "It's been carrying you around for like over 40 years. You put in so much garbage, it takes care of it. It's doing trillions of activities at any given moment, taking care of every single part of you." And when he said that, I was like, whoa, yeah, why didn't I think to thank my body? And, you know, I started to do that a little bit, like start to acknowledge it. It's like, well, thank you very much. Like, wow, like amazing. And then he was like, do you ever think to thank your mind? I was like, well, aren't I my mind? He's like, well, think about that. I was like, well, why would I thank my mind? He's like, because it does everything for you. Like it's telling you, like, you know, it's helping you to get through this whole 3D world and get all the information's in there. And do you ever think to thank it? And I didn't. So the whole point of this is that most people, including myself, have never thought that these are separate sort of intelligent beings that we have to live with, whatever we are, but like, you know, we're different than the mind, we're different than the body, whatever that is. We're all together here right now, and if we don't work together as a team and recognize we are a team, then it can just kind of get all crappy. But if we can recognize that we are a team and start to actually, you know, thank them and work with them and say, thank you very much. I do this all the time now. I'm like, thank you so much. Like the body is truly an intelligent being, and that's where the whole saying, listen to your gut comes from, right? It's because it's conscious. So you'll meet a person, you'll be like, I don't know what it is. He said all the right things, but it didn't feel right in my gut. It's like your body is actually sitting there going, no, this vibration is not right, or whatever it is. And then, of course, your mind will also do similar type of things, and it can kind of lead you astray if you don't know how to work with your mind. But there are sort of three things, and I don't know if that's where this whole sort of the Holy Trinity came from. I'm starting to think about all these things now, like body, mind, and soul. They actually kind of talk about that. They talk about your body as a temple, and if you can clean out the temple, obviously you can get closer to, you know, some sort of connection with the source, whatever you want to call it, that sort of thing. So I just want to throw that in, that this is stuff that I had no idea about, that I think is totally true now. Like, it's through my own experience. My body is an intelligent, separate entity, and so is my mind, and it's sort of like trying to figure out how that all works together and work better with them can really have some amazing results. Right,
and it can totally change your relationships to every other person in your life as well, in a few different ways. One of them is, like you were saying, the people that are not friendly. In fact, maybe they're so intimidating or distant that you can't even talk to them. They're affected starting immediately by changing your internal perspective. And we don't realize it, but you know, you've heard that people who practice certain religions like Santeria or voodoo or things like that are involved in cursing and blessing people, right? And they really believe in that, but we don't realize, most of us, that we're actually totally devoted to that, and we're doing it all the time. So the way that you feel towards somebody affects them, even if they're not conscious of it. And we're cursing and blessing people without paying any attention. If you start making that conscious, just like your other guest was talking about, Anil was his name, I think?
Anil Gupta, yeah.
Yeah, he was saying about acts of kindness. Well, your intent and your thought are acts of kindness or unkindness nonstop. So not only are you doing a lot of these acts all day, you're doing them all the time. And if you start blessing everybody, which means really sincerely on a feeling level wishing for wonderful things to happen to them, even if they're really unpleasant or difficult or dangerous people, because that could be us if we were looking through their eyes, then that comes back to you like multiplied, starting immediately, even if you don't feel it. And when they, you know, you talked about the things in the Bible, some really good things and some not true things and some really nasty things all mixed together. I think they left some good things in there by mistake, actually. But one of them was love your neighbor as yourself. And we may not realize that's because they are yourself. You know, we're not just one team and family. We're actually one being experiencing itself in all these different forms. So that's why we're so affected by each other. And if you start using that connection by sending out the most wonderful wishes for everybody that you really mean, it starts immediately changing all about everything about your perception, changes your whole world.
Yeah, you told me that in a private session we had together. And one thing that I think I've done right in my life, accidentally, is just like nothing I never planned, is I've always been the kind of person who doesn't wish ill on anyone. I just don't. Even like Donald Trump or all these people, I don't hope he dies tomorrow. I hope he stops doing the things he's doing, but I literally don't wish ill on anyone. I never have, for whatever reason. It's just been something I've always done. And, you know, I might not hope for the best for them. I might not hope Donald Trump has the best day tomorrow or anything like that, but I definitely don't wish ill on anyone, really. And a lot of people have said about my life, they're like, how is it that you, no matter what happens, you're always fine and everything seems to work out for you? And you know, you saying that, I'm thinking maybe I've been kind of like creating my own reality that way, in that I'm just not giving off bad energy to people. I'm actually giving them quite good energy, and it just comes back to me somehow. I don't understand how it works, but I think there's definitely something to it. So you told me about ways that I can even go further and actually think about people and really hope for the best for them in various ways. And I've been doing that with even people. I did it with the person who defrauded me and stuff like that. I've been doing it with other people. I did it with like people around me, including my family. I just like, you know, wish the very best for them. And I can kind of see it's changing everyone.
It really does. I mean, we had one, I don't mean to make this longer than you want to make it.
Yeah, we shouldn't make it too long, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much really relevant, important, interesting stuff here. There's a system called Hooponopono, which is, you know, really not discovering anything new, but it configured it in a way that maybe was kind of unique. It was a guy in Hawaii, I think at the time, named Dr. Hugh Len, and he found a way of projecting, doing what you just said, projecting good wishes towards somebody. And it was based on this really deep concept and reality that everybody in your universe that you perceive and don't perceive, that's a part of it, in every circumstance, everything that happens in your universe is projected by you. And that's true not just for you, but for absolutely everybody. And that goes beyond what mind can really grasp, because it starts saying, well, how can all these people be in control at the same time? And they are. And what that means is that anybody, including us, who decides to make use of that can change the projection, which includes everybody else's behavior. And you can't do it, you can't use that in a way that hurts anybody, because it won't work. You have to actually have this benevolent wish for people, like you were explaining that you naturally have, which is incredible. And he was called to help at a mental hospital where all the patients were becoming violent and the employees were all quitting because they couldn't handle it, and it was really a hellish situation. Kind of like a microcosm of some things happening in the world, you might say. But what he did, he was called in to deal with it. He took the personal files of each of the patients, each of the inmates, and didn't try to do it by interacting with the patient's physical, being, but took those files and focused on each one, and really, the key was that he really meant it sincerely and tuned into that person. And he said 4 things. He said, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, which I changed to please forgive me and heal. And the last thing was thank you, each one of which he absolutely meant. And over some time, all the patients got better and many of them went home normal again. That's really significant, because it can be used not just by him in a mental hospital, but by us in anything. And I think ultimately, when we start to really absorb how to do that in a deep way, I think it could be used on a scale of planetary scale, because it's only one tiny planet in the universe. Size is really totally relative. And once we get rid of the belief that we can't do that, if we make the change internally, and not just say we believe it, but really change our perception, I think that's our key to turning this whole thing around on a level that we're going to like a lot.
Yeah, there's something to what you're talking about, and I've tried some of this stuff myself, and I can see the results. So there's going to be some people out there who are going to go, these guys are crazy.
Yeah.
There's no scientific proof that this can happen. It's like, well, that's your mind talking right there. But, try it out for yourself. Just try treating everyone with true, wish the best for them, even if you don't like them, and see if that changes things around you. I definitely noticed it changing things, even as I've started to focus on it. And as I pointed out, my whole life, I kind of have been doing that. I've never wished anything ill on anyone, I don't think, ever. And everyone's like, how are you so lucky? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I've already been doing some of that stuff, and it is reverberating back to me in whatever form it is. Not to say that I've had the perfect life. I've had a lot of problems, but I always seem to get through everything fine. I've never seemed to be sick or anything, and all that kind of stuff.
One of the main barriers of people even thinking of trying to do that is the understanding of what love means, and we've all been taught that first you really like something or somebody, and then if it goes further, you really love them, you think they're wonderful. That's not the kind of love that this is talking about. It's like when the sun shines on the earth, it's not judging which plant is worth letting live and things like that. It's a free unconditional gift to everybody. Even the people doing the worst things in the world get the full sunlight if they want it, which they usually don't. But that love is like that. It's like you have this capability. It's like watering a plant to give this life-giving energy to anybody. And the people who are in the worst shape need it the most. But everybody does. But you have this unlimited supply. If you feel like you're giving it from your personality, you can burn yourself out and it doesn't work. But if you feel it coming into you from an unlimited source and just let it flow through to everybody and say, here, share it, because it's just rushing into you in a flood, not only do you not get tired or burned out no matter what they do, but you're going to really like the experience. It's kind of exhilarating.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, I try to keep these shorter. I don't know how long we've been talking already. Quite a while, actually.
More than 10 minutes, probably.
Yeah, so we could talk for hours and hours, and maybe I should have you on again at some point. Or definitely I should. It's just a matter of when and how, and so many amazing people I need to talk to. But you might come down to Acapulco. You also have your show. You should let people know about that. Let them know about the private show. Let them know that you do. I don't know if you do that to everyone, what you did with me, but you did like a private session with me. You might also want to, Richard, just sort of put it out there, because what I've found with life and reality is once you speak something, or once you even write something, it starts to become reality, and it's like the power of the spoken word. Or even when you spell something, it's called spelling for a reason. It's like casting a spell. You're creating it, and they say you write in cursive. That's like casting a curse. It's all kind of hidden language that they've done. So you might want to just put it out there to the universe that you would like to start a school for this sort of thing at some point, if you want to do that, and feel free to let people know everything you're up to.
Okay. Well, if it's okay, then in response to that, I'll mention 4 different things. As far as the show goes, it's Lost Arts Radio, and we have weekly guest shows like we did with you, and the archives going back 5 years are available. They're all free and available, and you can go to Lost, L-O-S-T, Arts, A-R-T-S, plural, radio.com, and that's access to all the archives and all the current and upcoming shows and articles and videos and all kinds of stuff there. The private club, also one more thing. Lost Arts Radio has a couple of different shows. It's got a guest show, like I just mentioned. It's also got kind of a news summary show that comes up Saturday afternoons, and that's all described there too. You can see that, implications of some of the things happening in the world physically. And then the club, which is really a major focus. I started that because if anybody's interested in actually learning what's forbidden about health information and also consciousness tools that people can use in their own life situation, whatever they're dealing with life, relationships, health issues, getting their body back, reversing aging, which you can definitely do, and all this stuff, then we need to talk about it privately, because the censorship is really ramping up right now, and anything that goes against what the global rulers want is probably going to be gone. So we set up a private members site, which is at planetaryhealingclub.com, planetaryhealingclub.com, and it'll show you access there. That's where we can talk privately. And I do private consulting sessions, but they're limited in availability and they're expensive. And so I thought, why not give people, even if they hardly have any money, the ability to have the same benefit, and every week, even if they miss the live interaction, they can have the archives. And this is a cheap, really good way to do it, because you can get constant interaction. And I'm there live every week on Saturday evenings, at least U.S. time. And if it's a bad time of day in your part of the world, then you just watch the archive and email in your feedback, and we can still interact. PlanetaryHealingClub.com. That's really exciting. That's to get your own life and health back, but also, if you want, to become part of a very serious project to change the situation planet-wide. And it sounds impossible, but it's not impossible. There's some incredible stuff that you always had available, and we just get out of touch with it. That's all. It's beyond what people would call magic. And then as far as the last thing that Jeff mentioned, people think I'm crazy. This will cement the idea completely. That when I was sleeping in a lab where I was working at the time, and I was given details of a school that I'm supposed to start, so that it's not just a few of us, but everybody around the world who's ready to actually to look at and do the work required. That's the thing about Planetary Healing Club. It's not really for spectators so much. It's if you're ready to really start changing stuff in your life and do the work, we'll get into the specific tools. And the school is a place where it could be demonstrated and experienced out in the open physically. And I was shown all about what that has to look like and how to build it and how to run it and everything. But I don't have any money for it. So, and I'm not going to do anything to raise money that would taint the atmosphere, because that has to be kept really clear and pure. So the only thing we're really doing right now to take in money for the nonprofit that I started to eventually fund the school and at least keep us going in the meantime is I started a nonprofit called LostArtsResearchInstitute.org. You can see it there. And if we find a way to get the money without compromising the intent and with no bad strings attached or, promoting anything I don't really want to promote or anything like that, if we find a source of the money, and I know there are people around who could support it if they wanted to without even noticing, then we'll build a school. And I have the details so that we could start building it tomorrow if that happens. So it's out there to the universe now.
That's great. So I think most things that have been really changed the world usually come in the form of some sort of just download from the universe. You hear about this all the time. So I don't find there's anything strange about that. In fact, a lot of the things that I've done that have really, changed some things, it usually comes in the form of I'm meditating or in a dream, and it just comes in,
Exactly. And we shouldn't have preconceptions about how it has to happen. So whatever's supposed to be, that's what I want. And the more you learn about your source and how connected you are to it and how really that's ultimately who you are. It's not sacrilegious to discover that. And all the greatest teachers who have been trying to share this stuff, many of them had to eventually say, yeah, that's what happened. That's who I am now. And they usually got tortured and killed for openly saying that. But it's where we're all going, and it's not a bad thing. So in the end, you just don't want to do anything other than what Spirit wants and say, okay, you take my life and just live it for me. That's not some selfless thing at all. That's 100% selfish. It's just realizing that that's what's going to really start making things better in amazing ways. Might as well start enjoying it right away. So I'm hoping I can meet some of you guys at Anarchast and maybe at the club meetings too. You're invited.
Great. And yeah, hopefully you can make it down to Acapulco. There's going to be so many people that are so on the same wavelength. Yeah, and so many people that are on the same wavelength. As you pointed out, Neil Gupta, who's doing similar sort of stuff. I've had on so many people. They're all going to be at the health and wellness sort of portion of the event. So should be some amazing people around, and as we're expecting 2,000 to 3,000 people also coming as well, and so many of them are just on a different level than most people you ever normally meet. So it's really quite an amazing event. I hope you can make it down. If you like this video, if you found this interesting at all, and I don't know how you couldn't find it interesting, but if you found this useful or something that you enjoyed or anything like that, just hit like, subscribe, share down below. We get censored, we get shadow banned. I think I have 250,000 subscribers to YouTube on Dollar Vigilante, and then we'll put up a video and it'll get like 5,000 views or something. So we get shadow banned and all that. So you hit the like, the subscribe, share. We're also on Steemit, we're on DTube. Support us there if you can, or whatever you want to do. I don't really care, but do what you want to do. It's all that sort of giving and giving back sort of a thing. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to give something back, just hit that little like button. Doesn't hurt too much. And
one thing about that, Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt, keep your train of thought, but as far as the shadow banning and the banning is going on, we have the same thing on YouTube, and we might get almost no viewers, but when that finally gets banned completely, there are multiple channels, but one of them that looks like it's going to be really good is Brighteon.com. BRIGHT Eon, like bright future or something like that. Brighteon.com, and if we disappear everywhere else, that's still going to keep us alive, so you can find us there.
Great. I didn't even know about that one. I know about BitChute, BitTube, DTube. I think we're on all of them. Yeah, so check those out. We'll have check those out, and we'll have the links to your stuff all down below, and that's basically it. As I mentioned, Anarchapulco coming up February 14th to 17th. The hotel's almost completely sold out now, but there's a few rooms left, so if you want to stay at the Princess Hotel, which is 1,000 rooms, make sure you do that in the next week or two. I think it's going to sell out before then, and Acapulco might sell out by, I don't want to make a guess, but probably before the conference begins it'll be sold out. So if you want to come down and check it all out, you can, and feel free to do so. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.